Yeah, hello. I think there's enough of us here, so I'll slowly get started. Um, I'll explain a bit about how the workshop is going to go and the links that you have to follow. Um, as you can see, the workshop is being recorded, so if you miss anything, I'll send out this and everything we cover as a resource that you can review afterwards. So no worries if you are also handling other matters. But thank you everyone for joining and for making time. I'm Chia Amisola. I'm speaking to you from New York. So it's 9 p.m. here. I hope you were all doing well. So the main thing that I wanted to share, this link that I've been spamming in the chat is the main resource for the class. It's poeticweb.com/bookmarklets. Or if you go on poeticweb.com, it will be the third link here. You'd click on bookmarklets as instruments. One thing to keep a note of, I'll just tell you how to navigate this site. I have this big link here. I don't know how else to put it. That is a link to the class sheet. Um, if you would like, keep this tab open in case you want to share the work that you do throughout the session. It's just a Google Sheet with several tabs below for each of the exercises that we do. You can see that this is going to be a very kind of like practical and practice oriented workshop. So we'll just experiment with making bookmarklets, setting them up, trying them out and feeling them across different sites. You'll see how easy they are to play with soon. If you'd like to start, feel free to list your name, where you're calling from, maybe a website that you're interested in playing with. Something that I had flagged in the workshop description and that you may have noticed in the text is that something we'll be thinking about is what it means to kind of manipulate and mold an existing website rather than making something new. We'll be thinking about how intervening on other sites can also be a fun form of authorship and relation making. So feel free to fill up these cells and then we'll slowly move through these tabs as things go on. I don't know if people have permissions to do so. I think it works. Um, so have this Google Sheet open if you'd like while I go through the website. I'll be talking through a mix of slides and this site. But something I also wanted to call out is that there's also this tutorial link at the top right. And it has kind of a rundown of the main things that we'll cover in this workshop. So in case you miss something or want to revisit something, um, it will be written down here. So I wanted to talk a bit about what bookmarklets are. Um, I'll give a bit of an overview and I'll talk about the form of the class. But while I do that, feel free to fill up this spreadsheet and let me know a bit about yourself. I'm excited to see the links that you drop in. In the meantime, I'll talk through. So again, have that class site up, poeticweb.com/bookmarklets. And if you'd like the Google Sheet, have it open in another tab side by side so you can share your work. And as an agenda, I'll give like a brief rundown of what bookmarklets are, and then we'll just jump into kind of different exercises where we'll try to actually execute and use these bookmarklets and then play with them on different sites. Ideally, you will have a filled bookmarks bar at the end of this, or also have an idea of how to integrate bookmarks in your practice, whether it's using it in a more kind of like poetic, expressive, fun way, or using it in a more utilitarian sense. I'm sure that you'll find a fun way to make use of it. It's going to be kind of like brisk. So, again, these materials will be shared afterwards. We have the hour together. And if anyone has any questions at any time, feel free to send them in the Zoom chat. I'll keep an eye out and I'll revisit the questions whenever we have a gap. Make sure there's space also to make sure everyone's caught up. But let me speak about bookmarklets as I mentioned a bit earlier, bookmarklets aren't new. I'll show you how old they are in a second, but the interest in putting this workshop together really came out of um, a space of playing with websites and the indie side of the internet for a long time and thinking about how kind of like authorship and consumption manifests around the internet, in that I feel that a lot of the conversation around making the internet better, per se, is always about making our own spaces and making our own handmade communities and making things that are homegrown and small. These are all important and very necessary. I'm sure a lot of people here come from kinds of similar circles or sentiments where we're tired of the shape of the web today. Um, but I feel like there are other ways to kind of engage people in that desire to like remold the web into something better. Um, or more simply, there's more ways to kind of reorient our relationships with the internet other than just making new websites or making new things. Um, so this workshop is all about how we might manipulate something that exists, um, make interventions and manipulate it, and play with the sites that we see that maybe feel a bit cold and sterile or unusable, and make them something that we have fun with, that we can inject ourselves into, or maybe make them even more unusable. But maybe that will make a bit more sense after I explain what bookmarklets actually are. Um, a great way to demonstrate that is going into the poeticweb.com/bookmarklet site, um, where I'll give a quick rundown of how to actually get started so you can try out the bookmarklets here. Um, if you haven't coded before, this page might seem a bit intimidating, but I've kind of designed this hour so that we don't really have to touch code at all or really think about it. Rather, we're mostly going to think about like the utility and function of these scripts. So what you see here is a grid of kind of like actions and the code um, associated with that action. And something you can do on the page is just kind of click on any one of these buttons and you can see them take effect. So I just clicked on the button say random words. And what this does, it's a script that you probably guess. It just takes random pieces of text from the page and then displays them in large, focused on the center of the screen. So maybe to start, you can try clicking on some of these actions and getting a feel for what they do. I click on the redact words button, and it does this effect where it erases a bunch of text on the page. If you keep clicking it, it runs the script over and over again and erases even more chunks of text. Um, so what we're essentially going to be doing for the hour is kind of playing with these very small bits of code that do these kind of small manipulations on a page and figure out how to kind of use them as our instruments to kind of sequence and orchestrate these changes on web pages. I click on flashlight and it changes my cursor into this like glob of light. And the rest of the page is darkened. So you can see as I click on all of these buttons, they run the script for every click and they kind of stack on each other. I think that's the interesting thing about this, that we'll eventually figure out how to chain these together. Another thing about what we'll be playing with is that once I refresh, the page is back to normal. So these are all kind of just like interstitial changes. They only happen on our side of the page per se, or client side. So once you refresh, you haven't made these changes to the actual website. Everything will be back to normal. So that's a way to kind of like test this list of like pre-made effects. Now the fun part is actually turning them into bookmarklets. So what a bookmarklet is, I'll open a new tab on Chrome. And I recommend following through on Chrome, but if you're in Safari or Firefox or other browsers, this should feel similar. Make sure you have your bookmarks bar visible. You'll notice that on this page, I didn't have mine visible. If you don't have it visible yet, a way you can see it again is hit Command Shift B or Control Shift B if you're on Chrome. Otherwise, try to find wherever the bookmark setting is on your browser. Um, this gives you a sense of, the whole list. But on Chrome, to actually see the bookmarks bar, I right click here as I've opened a new tab, and then I hit Show Bookmarks Bar. And now that I've shown it, if I go back to the Poetic Web tab, it should be visible. If you got your bookmarks bar to show, can I get a signal in the comment or in the chat just so I know? It would be hard to move on if folks can see this. I appreciate the hearts. And if you are stuck at any point, feel free to um, leave a comment on the chat and I'll revisit the piece. And it's likely that if you got stuck on something, someone else might be experiencing the same. Okay. So now that the bookmarks bar is visible, again, a quick way to do that or to hide and unhide it is to hit Command Shift B or Control Shift B if you're in Chrome. What a bookmarklet is that it's essentially these bits of code that you see embedded in a bookmark. I don't know how to like speak about this without being a bit too redundant, but um, if I click some of the existing bookmarks I have, like let's say I bookmark this poetic web page, um, it normally saves whatever is in the address bar. So URLs and site and URLs are like the general thing that you save on there. Um, but something that bookmarks can also contain is bits of JavaScript. So these are the pieces of code that will actually run these functions. The syntax of it is something I won't go too deep into, but then you'll see that instead of like starting with www dot or https, instead starts with JavaScript colon generally, beginning this piece of code. So an easy way to begin playing with these bookmarks is I'll explain two ways of kind of getting these pre-made functions on the bar. Um, because they act like URLs, I made it so that you can just drag these onto your bookmarks bar. So I'm just clicking hold and then dragging them over. And they're essentially saved as your bookmarklets. To run them, you just click on them. So I click once and it has run the function. So this was like gravity effect. So you can see all the elements in the page have fallen and displaced themselves. I can click on it again and it executes the script again. And I can click on it again and again and again. And yeah, see this movement. And again, if I hit refresh, everything is back to normal. So while I speak a bit more about the history of the bookmarklet, I'd encourage you to try out these different actions. Drag them here into your bookmark bar, click on them and see how they take effect. I should say that the second way to add them onto the bar is copying the existing pieces of code um, and then pasting them where the URL is. So again, I kind of just explained the syntax. So you would just copy the whatever's in the text box there here. It's much easier to do this dragging, but we'll need to do that mode of adding a bookmark later. So that's the basic gist of what a bookmarklet is. Um, so they are these tiny bits of JavaScript that can be contained where your bookmarks are. So, the browser's bookmarks bar. And when they're here, you can kind of take action or you can kind of use them on every single page, not just limited to this site. So after you've dragged some from here, um, you could even run them on the Google Sheet. You can run them on Google, and you can kind of see how different sites respond to the to the bit of code. And maybe you can also start learning about how not every site responds the same way because of how the web today is generally designed. Like for example, Google Maps, which is more app-like, um, will not have anything arranged because there's not really like real elements that this script can grab onto. It's a bit limited. Like you can see the whole container shifts around rather than the actual like elements in the map. A bit about the history of bookmarklets. They are ancient and they're just something I've been playing with recently, but they probably date back to the early 2000s or even the late 90s. Um, this is a quote from I think I have not had the attribution, but this is one quote from someone I will cite later that speaks to why it is interesting to play with bookmarklets and kind of like relates to the very ideal I mentioned earlier of wanting to kind of manipulate the web and make it your own. Um, I spoke a bit about kind of this shifting of authorship. And it's fun because normally the way we use the web is just kind of experiencing a site the way that the way its author or creator has presented to us, and that kind of like dominates our notion of like surfing and browsing online. But bookmarklets, of course, kind of invert that notion and allow us to become the author. Something that normally brought us to another web page has now become this kind of fun utility or like magic spell that we can just use to kind of shift the website around. And most of its use is like impractical, ephemeral, and temporary, but still a nice way of kind of arranging a site and reimagining it and reorienting it for our needs. And you can see that there's going to be a lot of like poetic and fun and kind of useless expressions of that, but also there's potentially a lot of like utility there. If you are interested, I feel like um, there's a lot of kind of like scattered texts about the origins of bookmarklets, but then they probably began back when the browser Netscape was supporting them. And it feels interesting. Netscape probably began supporting bookmarklets in the late 90s, or now in 2025, and we're at a very real risk of bookmarklets maybe no longer being supported because there's no real reason that they should exist these days. You'll see a bit about why here. This is an old collection of bookmarklets that was hosted on like Square Free. It's ancient. Um, this one, which is now hosted on archive.org, because I'm not sure how like sturdy the old website is. It was a series of bookmarklets that were useful for web development. I think the site was one of the largest collections of bookmarklets in the past. Um, because bookmarklets have never changed in form, you can see that a lot of these actually still work. Um, so it's the same premise here. If I hover over each of these links, you can see at the bottom left of the browser, it's a bit small, but you'll see the JavaScript kind of like um, kind of preview instead of a normal link. So it's also in the same syntax as the bookmarklets that we're playing with today, JavaScript colon and then an enclosed function. Um, so you can try dragging some of these, or I can try dragging some of these, running them on this page. They kind of like still work. Um, I guess like a lot of these maybe are not ideal, but here, this one that views the scripts on the page um, still functions today and could be run, say, on the Poetic website and still serves a use. So it's kind of fun also if you take time later on to dig through these old Bookmarklet guide sites and just see how many of them still work or how many of them have been deprecated. Another term for bookmarklets is also favelets. These are the browser favorites. Um, yeah, again, when I was like kind of like looking up who has been using bookmarklets recently, all I could really find were a bunch of these articles about how they were dead. A lot of their previous utilities um, are kind of now obsolete because browsers have just kind of built in a lot of the tools that people used to use them for. Like, for example, these old web development bookmarklets, you probably can just like right click and inspect an element and get all the information you need and even better fidelity. But then this level of inspection and web development tools didn't exist in that early era. It's nice to see how much has been kind of like built in already. Um, but also interesting to see how bookmarklets still might be relevant today. I feel like it's always nice to play with technologies that are kind of on the verge of death. You don't know when they're really going to die. So I'm going to move into a bunch of exercises where we're actually going to like learn a bit more about these bookmarklets, and eventually we're going to prompt our own very soon. But um, for the first exercise, it's kind of very similar to what I just walked through. Um, on poeticweb.com/bookmarklets, I just want to make sure everyone is kind of set up and knows how to execute the bookmarklets and gets a sense of how they work. Um, so again, make sure your bookmarks bar is revealed and that you've dragged these bookmarklets on. You'll notice that some are prefixed with like for YouTube or audio. Can guess that these probably work best on YouTube or on Street View, or these do something with audio. Um, what I want people to think about then is I have to refresh this because I broke it. In the tab for the surface exercise, with the pre-existing bookmarks we have, I'd love for people to kind of like take a look at different websites and think about which of these bookmarks maybe work well or particularly well on a specific site, or maybe don't work at all. An example is how I was going over how Google Maps kind of just like breaks with a lot of these. Um, I think it might be interesting to think about like what exactly is kind of the structure of a website that really lends itself to being like manipulable. Um, I have some sample links here, or there's some links that people have already dropped in. I keep using this as an example. Wikipedia is particularly like good as a surface to play with bookmarklets, but you'll notice that websites that are particularly text and image heavy, like wikis like this, or like text forums, maybe even some social media sites, work well with a bunch of the generic bookmarklets that I've put here. Um, I just press the bookmarklet, rearrange everything instantly on Wikipedia, and even this looks like interesting. Um, I might run this same bookmarklet on Google Images. We'll search Earth, and also functions pretty neatly. I will go to a random link here that people have dropped in, and also kind of like play with how the bookmarklets feel, etc. Um, so as an initial exercise, I'd love for people to kind of like drop in like a link, maybe the same link that you've had in the welcome here, or another link that you've stumbled upon, and kind of note down which of the pre-made bookmarklets like work well. I love for people to like experiment. Um, do this for like 5 minutes. Um, a lot of these bookmarklets are designed quite generically, and some of them are designed a bit more specifically. Some of them are designed more for utility. You can imagine that if I drag this open all the images in a new page bookmark up on my bar and then run it on something like the UCLA Digital Library site, and I type in tree, um, and use this utility bookmarklet, it might be a bit more useful. It provides a nice way to kind of like easily download assets. Same thing if I run it on this Wikipedia page that is filled with images. There's a bunch of logos, but then there's kind of like the smaller thumbnails that I might be interested in. And what might be also be nice to kind of find the limitations here and also find unexpected places where um, the bookmarklets actually reveal something that may not have been obvious. In Google Maps, I clicked on that same open all the images in the new page bookmarklet. I'll notice that it gave me some tiles, um, but really nothing else. So maybe it gives you a bit of insight into how it has arranged certain things. I think something to think about in terms of like surface is again, there's a pretty big distinction between how websites are built these days. And sometimes more specific bookmarklets work better for certain sites. I'll just speak through the examples that exist here. I drag in this for YouTube Zoom action. I'll load up a YouTube video. Maybe I'll try to find a more scenic video, but um, something behind the code of this bookmarklet that makes it not really work well on any other page is it's designed to specifically manipulate the YouTube player UI or manipulate like um yeah, just how the YouTube interface works. Um so if you dig under the hood of the website and like view its source, not every page with a video is laid out the same. So to just like put it like vaguely, as we think about like what a specific bookmarklet feels like versus like a generic one, it might be worth considering like how the form of certain sites might be a bit more specific than others. Again, there's like a big distinction between like the text and image sites, like people's portfolios, or things like Google Images versus things that are more like application based. Um, Here's a better example of the YouTube case where if I load some video with actual changing scenery, the zoom should work nicely. It's kind of this fun effect. Something to also think about is what it would feel like if you have multiple windows on multiple different sites. each running different bookmarklets. I'll just like plant the seed as people get settled. These two are the same YouTube video running this script that zooms it at different levels and then jumps to different timestamps. I simultaneously have another window open. There's this timeline that I've run this scrolling action on that is also found from the website. I've run the gravity effect on it. There's also a difference between the bookmarklets that I'm running. For these two YouTube effects, I kind of don't have to do anything. I hit them once. Probably don't want to hit them multiple times or else it might break, but they just run themselves. This scrolling effect is running itself, but this gravity effect has only executed once whenever I click on it. So as you feel out these scripts, you also might notice which ones are a bit more active and require your kind of like intervention to keep them going if you want more of an effect, or which ones you can kind of just leave up. Okay. I will now go on to how to prompt the bookmarklets. Um, but I hope people begin thinking about how to experiment with these little scripts. For the next exercise, we'll actually kind of work outside of the pre-made bookmarklets and try to create our own. So I hope you have a website in mind. Maybe it's the same one that you've been experimenting with. Maybe another one will come to mind. Um, a bunch of these bookmarks on the Poetic website were kind of like designed um, such that, or kind of designed in a way where I just like prompted them into existence. Um, Something you'll notice about the form, right, is that it has to kind of be like tightly compressed and compact. Existing code can work and be converted into this form, but when playing with bookmarklets, I'm much more interested in like kind of like the human act of like sequencing them, figuring out when to execute them, those kind of like scenes of me like layering windows upon windows of them, kind of like literally playing with these. So in the mind, I'm less interested in like, making really compact and performant code to run these. And I'm more interested in just getting the right tools and playing with um, how they can manipulate an existing website. And I imagine maybe people here are interested in the same kind of effect. So I'm not really going to go deep into the code aspect. Um, so for this next exercise, um, I will, or we'll take some time to just try to prompt an idea for a new bookmarklet, and then you'll run your own bookmarklet on your site of choice or on many sites. So the way to do this is I would just open like ChatGPT or Claude or some tool of choice. Um, and I'm here on this exercise prompt home tab of the spreadsheet. I have like two samples of like templates that I would use as a baseline, but really it can be as simple as write a JavaScript bookmarklet that does X. Um, Before I like fill in the prompt template, I'm gonna flag like what works effectively. And it's something hopefully you're starting to see after we've run some of the scripts or after you've like felt some of the pre-made scripts. Um, it is generally good to be a bit more simple about what you're manipulating. Maybe try to manipulate like one thing at a time, like the text size, the color, hide something, redact something, change something. Um, with kind of nuance there. Um, you might make a bookmarklet that is a bit more specific to a certain website. Like if you want to work with something that's more application based, like Instagram or YouTube or Google Street View, it would be good to like indicate that you are working on those platforms, just because they're structured in a different way. If you have a bookmarklet that you know you want to run on something like Pinterest or a portfolio site that is a bit more like classic text and image, um, then maybe that is like more generic and more safe. Um, but yeah, the general sense is like figure out the level of like specificity or make it like ultra generic. Either swing one of those angles or extremes. Um, Definitely don't try to be vague. I'll give an example of like the level of specificity that is like interesting. Um, I'm just like winging this. Write a JavaScript bookmarklet. I can paste into a bookmark to replace every mention of AI, ChatGPT, OpenAI. This is a bit like it's a bit boring to do. Uh, the different bird species. I'm gonna zoom this in so people can see. Again, I just like copy pasted this from the prompt example in this spreadsheet. Um, I'm writing that there should be a very large list of potential bird species that are invoked instead of AI. I will hit enter and I hope it does well, so I do not waste more. My seed has chosen shoebill, secretary bird, bee, hummingbird. Very adequate choices, Philippine eagle. And again, I showed a bit about the syntax earlier, but just make sure it comes in this form of like starts with JavaScript colon, and you can see that there's like this function word in it. Um, and if you want, then you can reprompt it if it hasn't come out in the correct form. Just specify that it must be a JavaScript bookmarklet, and it will eventually kind of output something in this right way. Um, so then I copy this bit of code, and an easy way to, if you have a lot of stuff in your bookmarks bar like me, instead of like creating a new bookmark, I'm just going to edit something existing. Let me set myself up by going to um, One Republic AI, and I will go to my bookmarks bar with the piece of code in my clipboard. I will right click some bookmark that I don't like anymore. Um, and then I will rename it, and then I'll delete everything in the URL piece and paste in the code that I just got. And I will click it, and I hope it runs. Mm, I don't know if this worked. Okay, I've done it on a Google search, and now we have defeated the evil, and it has become the lilac breasted roller. I'll mention another tool just in case people's outputs didn't come out right. Um, or in case you have another script in mind. Um, Self promo, but I mean, the poeticweb.com site has a bunch of other kind of like resources if you want to go through afterwards. But um, I have this like selection of scripts here that are in normal like JavaScript format. What do I mean by that? This is like code, but you code, but it's not in that JavaScript colon bookmarklet format. It's not as compact. Um, You might not need this as long as you specifically prompt for a bookmarklet, but in case you have another piece of code that you like, on the class site, I have this converter at the top center. And if there's just like something running in the background that encloses it and compresses it so it works correctly. I don't know if this will work. Okay, it works. Um, so I pasted this normal bit of JavaScript that was not like correctly formed, like in that wrong form. If I pasted this as is, it won't even accept it in the URL because it needs to be in that bookmarklet syntax. So yeah, there's this converter that does it behind the scenes, and I just drag this button here, and now it works. So this bookmarklet or this bit of JavaScript that I pasted in and converted into a bookmarklet does this work where whenever I move my cursor, it's still right now. Now I move it, it changes the word that is displayed in the center. And it's like lifting the word from somewhere in the screen. But yeah, that's just a side note. So yeah, that's my bird AI prompt. Um, I will now share this with the world in case you want what I have in the spreadsheet. I would love to see what people do. I'm gonna do a second prompt example where I do something a bit more specific. Um, I will do, let me find a good video. I will do Street View as an example. This is not what I want. So in Google Street View, this is how I would think about like generating a bookmarklet just to speak and share. I think it's equally important again to kind of like feel the surface and the texture of the site that you want to manipulate and really pay attention to what is changing and what can be molded. Um, I walk through Google Street View and I notice that the coordinates here are changing as I move. That makes sense. I copy the address if I want to, share the street view at that specific location. Um, that probably means that if this is just like the latitude and longitude, um, that might have a Google Street View associated with it, I can prompt for a script that is like given or like read the URL of my page and jump to a nearby location. So I wanted to like change the numbers here, not like too major. I don't want it to like go up a whole number, but just like change the decimals, like what it's doing as I click around. So there's my template. I'll use this smaller one. Let's see if it's also as good. Write a JavaScript bookmarklet that on Google Street View helps me jump or makes me jump to a nearby location. Change it. Change the, if you're working with a specific site and you notice this kind of like pattern, it might also be interesting to like give it more specific examples so you know what exactly should be manipulated. Something I test here is like what exactly if the URL is like necessary and which is not. Looks like a lot of this is needed. I don't know what will work. Can still be in Street View. I don't know if this will work. Again, I copy the code. I'll change this YouTube thing. I'll rename it. I'll paste the code in the URL. I'll execute it, and it doesn't seem to be doing anything. So in case you're running into something similar, even if you don't know code, I would encourage you to open the dev tool. So this is basically like the console, which shows you like what is going wrong. So to access that, I'm hitting this button here, and then I'm hitting more tools, developer tools. And if you don't immediately see it, just you have to hit this tab that says console. Um, and basically because the bookmarklet is just running JavaScript on the page, it's like pasting like, or yeah, it's just like running this bit of code. Anything that goes wrong with that code should also be visible here. So what I would test is I click on this button and it looks like there's like some syntax error. And the classic way that any vibe coder does it is I copy paste the error that I'm getting back here. And ideally it fixes it. If it doesn't, then maybe there's a possibility that the code is not compressed enough. So I'd say compress it, do a one-liner, remove the alerts. When I say remove the alerts, I mean that some of the code samples on the site, if you just like take a glance, they have this thing, or they throw an alert. And if I run it, it gives me like these notifs, and maybe I don't really need them because I don't really care. Um, so this is what I would say. I copy the code again. I don't know if this will work. Um, uh, it kind of does, but I don't think it's jumping, ideally. I have other iterations of this Google Street View thing that work better. But you can see it's like a trial and error thing, especially when you're working with um, a specific site. The more kind of like app-like it is, the harder it is to kind of like crack it at times. I have this functioning version of it. Um, that uses a different URL scheme. You can see that it's changing, or yeah, it's not reading, or it's not doing the same thing as my previous code to keep it simply. So that probably works better. So it's also worth experimenting with different ways of like, you know, achieving the same vision. I will share this functioning bit in case anyone is interested also in the street view blocking. Um, uh, we technically have only 7 minutes. I'll probably go a bit over, but in case anyone has like questions in mind about now, I'll speed a bit through. So feel free to drop them in the chat if there's anything you want to give me, if you want me to give more attention to something, or um, yeah, if you have any comments or anything. I'll speak quickly about the utility piece, but another dimension of the bookmarklets that I wanted to share a bit about is kind of like practical applications for it. I walked through a bit of I walked through a bit of like potential use cases at the beginning, um, where at the end of the class site, I had these scripts for opening all the images in a new page, opening all the links in a new page. Um, if you saw the old example on Square Free that I was looking at earlier, you can see that a lot of like the original uses of bookmarklets were for more utility-oriented purposes. Um, so aside from all the fun effects here, it might be interesting to, again, like on especially database oriented sites, link heavy sites when you're doing research, when you want information presented to you in a different way. Bookmarklets can be a really easy tool for, again, kind of extracting information from the page and assembling it into a more digestible form. Um, the most common thing that I've used bookmarklets for when I do like projects that work with a lot of like found assets is definitely um, the flow like this, where I'll like isolate the images that I need and I can get like the URLs. If I want to like, I don't know, easily copy paste a bunch of these. Some stuff like the collections website of UCLA works well for it. Wikipedia works well. I also enjoy like browsing the Internet Archive and seeing how it works here. And there's different like levels of specificity and depth you can get into here that really kind of like revolve around understanding the form of the site. Like for example, a limitation that I'll call out is this open all the images in a new tab kind of shortcut doesn't really work on every website that doesn't outright present the images. Like if I run it on archive.org, it doesn't work at all. They load in images in a different way. Um, so I won't go over how to do it specifically, but then in knowing the structure of any site, it is really helpful to right click, inspect element, and kind of like just dig into the code. Because again, every site is structured differently. So an action like make every word a different color or make every image like disappear is easy and a bit generic, but then um, some sites maybe require more fine tuning. So something that I would do a lot in working is digging into this. And again, I'm like, if you're not familiar with HTML or code, um, you can just point at an element and then hit inspect elements on that specifically, and it will bring you directly to where that element is like present in the code. And then you can just like copy the existing bit of code here. So you'd have to right click, hit edit as HTML, and you can like copy this information. And the idea here is that as you read the page's structure, you can feed this in your prompt, just as I was trying to like dissect the URL in Google Street View to tell or to help prompt like more specifically like if the image is enclosed in a container like this, try to pull it out. Or it looks like images actually come in this form, try to guess it from this bit of code I've provided you and pull that out. Um, I'll write this out on the site in more detail. And if anyone has like a specific site that they're trying to kind of scrape information from, that you want kind of guidance on, let me know. But that's generally the approach I would go for. And again, it's totally possible to kind of read this and develop an intuition for it, even if you don't necessarily know a lot about HTML. It certainly helps, but all you really need to know is how to look under the hood and provide like the sufficient context. So, um, like the pattern and structure of the site can eventually be used to like pull the right information out. I'm talking a bit vaguely, but that's an example case, or that's an example way I'd approach um, extracting things from a site that isn't as easy. Mm, other instances where this is useful, if you're looking for like specific text snippets, um, if you want to just like copy information en masse, I feel like those are like the most common things that I use bookmarklets for that don't really have another workaround. Um, I would encourage you to maybe like make something generic that you can eventually reuse over and over to your own purposes. Like if I'm working on a project where I want to extract like news headlines or something, um, if I go on like, I don't know, like Rappler.com and I want to just like scroll through and quickly get all the headlines, that's an example of kind of a prompt I'd, or that's an example of a instance where I'd use a more like utility oriented bookmarklet. Mm, and I might start again by inspecting elements and then trying kind of understanding the structure here. Um, uh, I'll just finish this thought. So again, to give a more specific example of like how to extract or extract something from a website that is designed a specific way, I would do get a bookmarklet that um, helps extract all the headlines from a news site. It looks like the headlines come in this form. Again, I took this from or from inspecting element and then viewing the code. Um, I might see that there's actually like different instances. Like this article is a bigger one, and I was like looking at a smaller case. So maybe there's several forms. Mm, okay. So yeah, that's the approach I take, and hopefully this works. Um, but yeah, I think this is a really fun way of trying to work with more data in your work. Um, it might not work for specific sites on first go again. But yeah, after a reprompt where I just asked it to compress it, looks like it grabs some headlines. So that's just a utility example. So the last thing I wanted to share, and I know we're over, um, is maybe like a more conceptual way of thinking about bookmarklets to leave folks with. I just talked about like a very specific granular use case for bookmarklets that involves kind of extracting information in very specific cases or doing something as specific as like jumping around in Google Street View. But if you were interested at all in the vein of like desktop performance or just like playing with websites and making kind of like a interactive performance out of lots of sites in general, um, you can recall that instance earlier where I was running a bunch of bookmarklets in different sites and just combining them in different ways. So the last exercise, if you want to like ever embark on it on your own time, is think of how you would kind of use these bookmarks now as a series of like instruments that you would arrange and orchestrate, um, where your whole desktop, not just the tab, just not just a single tab, might come to life and play with each other. Um, Practical uses of this, I don't know, maybe it's more like for artistic purposes, or maybe you have a desire to like display something. But what I mean is it feels it feels interesting to think about how all of these different effects might play together and extend beyond each other. When preparing this workshop and playing with bookmarklets, I kind of found it fun to look through pages in new ways for myself, scrolling through a lot of like dense databases and tables and information and injecting just like this bit of randomness and surprise to how they might work. Something like scrolling a page over and over can be pretty useful when you're reading something slowly from afar, but it can also be fun in the context of a performance. Some other bookmarklets, like this one where I go to a random link in a page, um, feel nice as a way of injecting more surprise. I don't want to be necessarily thinking too hard about every destination I go. If I keep running this link on Wikipedia, sometimes, or most of the time, it brings me to other Wikipedia pages, but occasionally it takes me away from Wikipedia and brings me to one of its sources. This is a bit different from hitting random article on the site because it's still some destination that exists on the page. And this is the end of that. I have these other bookmarklets where I provided it like poems or text, something that doesn't lift from the page at all, but is more so playing with the whole screen and showing me something new. I have other bookmarklets that watch for changes that I do, but I feel a bit slower. I'm gonna go back to the site just to show how these might work in sequence. I ran this bookmarklet that listens for any change on the page, any element moving around. It's a bit high, sorry about that. It might be interesting to consider a browsing session or a surfing session where you kind of just pull these out, surprise other people around you with their effects. Maybe they can help you draw attention to things that you don't normally look at. Maybe you can kind of use these little tools and scripts in a performance at a party when you're leaving your laptop on and just want something to show. Um, Maybe you have a YouTube video that you want to kind of like easily manipulate and uh, edit and play with, and that YouTube Zoom tool is really helpful for. Um, but yeah, the magic I think is really in how these effects kind of like work together, how multiple browser windows playing these might exist, how different sites that take different forms might play with the bookmarklets. This is a good example that I like showing. Not sure if people are familiar with the site. This person does not exist, but one of the scripts on the page was simply duplicating the existing site in a grid. And because this site generates a different face on every load, you can see that I kind of have these fun um, grids of people. Um, so what would a performance look like if you sequence these together? Other things I wanted to show. Um, it's fun to kind of like use these scripts to watch the browser play itself. running this script that looks at every input on a page and then fills it up with random things. Like me. I wonder what it would look like if I run this script on a Google Sheet. Yeah, that's my rundown of bookmarklets and their many fun uses and potentials. Um, I will take a look at the Google Sheet, and I really appreciate everyone who has shared kind of their uses of the scripts. If you end up making something out of the workshop, um, or have questions about how to make something work, um, I would love to see stuff. Um, if you have like a specific question for anything like fun or utility based, definitely let me know and I'll see how I can help. If I ever run a bookmarklet and it's made my computer freak out or glitch or been too infinite, I mean, I try to make them such that they don't do that. I think that's very possible. You can prompt for a bookmarklet probably that's like open 1 million windows, and I think you'll get there. I'm curious to know if people are gonna use this for practical things or if it's just for funsies. I started engaging in this in earnest just because I thought it would be fun for like performances, or I just thought it would be nice to like jump to random links as I surf Wikipedia or did research. Um, but I wanted to show those specific bits about using bookmarklets for utility because I've found it like surprisingly helpful as I've been doing a bunch of like art projects or like writing stuff. Really helpful when you're sifting through a bunch of like textual pages. You can see that where bookmarklets perform well, kind of really again lend themselves to those types of sites. So yeah. On the question on incorporating P5JS and bookmarklets, so that's totally possible. Because the bookmarklet is just a bit of JavaScript, you can you can ask for things that incorporate external libraries. And if I really go deep, you can, I don't know, because of that, you can probably do a lot of fun things. Like, um, I used to enjoy a lot of like multiplayer bookmarklets. So they need like sockets and web connections to work. So bookmarklet, I forgot what it was called, but there used to be this website that was popular maybe a long time ago where it was a bookmarklet that turned any page into a shared canvas. I remember using it on Tumblr a lot. So um, it was working with a database of some sorts where you could see anyone else's drawing on that same URL at the exact same position it was left in. So you could do a bunch of things with external libraries for sure. I think some of the music bookmarklets, if I'm not mistaken. Oh no, I thought they were using Twin.js, but I think they use just like the browser default audio context. But you can probably figure out a way to like do some imports. Have you tried it in a prompt? Maybe worth doing now and seeing if it works. Okay. Um, I'll stay around for like a couple more minutes, but um, that's generally the end of the workshop. I'll share all these resources out. Um, I think something fun that could emerge from this is definitely look at the sites that people have shared and their recommendations for what works well on it, and look at the scripts that people have shared as well and use them yourself. Again, take the code, copy paste them into your bar and see how they play onto like a site. This tree one is very cute. I am working on expanding this website so it has like a big collection of bookmarklets, and I'll try to be a bit more specific about like useful areas where it's useful for like extraction and like more functional purposes outside of like the fun expressive stuff. So if anyone is interested there or has like a specific use case, um I'd love to hear more so I can kind of expand the site. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming. I know this workshop was at a strange time for many people. A mix of, yeah, every time zone. I'm stunned by all the cities people have come from and appreciate you taking the time to join and learn a bit. Again, I'll send out all materials afterwards. If you have any questions from the workshop, I will now do like a brief plug of Develop, which is the organization that is hosting this workshop. Um, we're a group that is teaching around more critical and creative ways of playing with technology, primarily for Southeast Asia, and we're based in the Philippines, but obviously are welcome to this community anywhere. If you want to like continue the conversation or have workshop questions, I'm probably most reachable on the Develop Discord. I will share a link to it on the in the chat. Um, Also, Luma is where the announcement will go with all the workshop resources. So you should see it on your email afterwards. The recording, all the materials here, everything everyone has explored. Um, I hope this was useful, interesting, or that you at least got to like try a bookmark and learn about what it is and maybe decide if you ever want to play with it again or not. Again, a lot of the sites definitely say it's the end of bookmarklets, but I think we can bring it back. Just 20 of us is all it takes, I feel, to start a new movement.